Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary.
Support for It's Just Business comes from Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Ready or not, the holidays are here. Still struggling to come up with the perfect gift for that special someone in your life? The answer is Manscaped. The Manscaped Perfect Package 2.0 is the perfect gift this holiday season. It includes the Lawnmower 2.0 trimmer, the Crop Preserver anti-chafing deodorant, and the Crop Reviver toner spray, which is infused with cooling aloe vera to keep you from sweating, sticking, and smelling. Trust me, she will love the manly scent of these products. It even comes with a pair of Manscaped boxer briefs to keep you feeling fresh all day long. Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. Their new Lawnmower 2.0 has proprietary advanced skin-safe technology to prevent nicks and snags, has a rechargeable battery, and it's waterproof so you can use it in the shower. Stop using the same trimmer down below that you use on your face. So what are you waiting for? Head over to manscaped.com now and get 20% off your order and free shipping by using the code BIGHEADS. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Promo code BIGHEADS.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstein Network, a show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports, business, media, industrial complex. I am joined, as always, by my yin-yang partner, Steve. How you doing today, Steve?
Doing all right. Just fine. It is another Redskins football day, which always makes me excited. We're recording this on an abnormal Sunday today, which, makes for kind of a long day, but that's okay. That's all right. I'll get through it. Doing 3 podcasts and writing and watching a football game today, but that's all right.
Well,
I do it for you people.
If someone had said you were doing that with a lot of your free time 15 years ago, you probably would have been excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than doing nothing with your free time. Nothing else.
That's true.
Because most people go into bars and drink with their free time, and that's just not me, so I've got to have something productive to do. The other thing, I could go shoot guns. I love that. Shoot guns, play golf, watch sports.
Well, there you go. Your co-host on the Hogstein, Alex, actually does go to bars and drink and podcast, so it takes all kinds.
He doesn't shoot guns and play golf, though.
No, it does not.
And he doesn't have kids, is the other thing. He has time for this.
That's right. He has time to be wasting. All right, so let's jump in. We got a lot of interesting topics today. Sometimes we scrounge and still find good stuff, and sometimes stuff just pops right onto the front pages of not only the sports page, not only our local sports page, but becomes a national story. And we've got one heck of a federal sports business law case brewing with this healthcare scam. Steve, explain it better than me.
Yeah, okay. So, a whole bunch of football players have been indicted by the federal government in the Eastern District of Kentucky. So, here's the deal. The collective bargaining agreement back in 2006 established something called the Gene Upshaw NFL Player Health Reimbursement Account Plan. And how it basically works is once you get vested in the retirement plan, meaning you hit the 3-year mark, then each year the NFL will place a certain amount of money into an account for you. It'll be along the lines of like $25,000, $30,000 a year, and it keeps accruing as long as you're in the NFL, up to $350,000. And then the NFL appointed Cigna Healthcare as an agent to manage this thing. It's a tax-free medical benefit plan. And so the idea here is if you have medical expenses that aren't otherwise covered, you can submit a request to Cigna for reimbursement from your account. So if you need to buy something for, say you need to buy some equipment, you need to buy a wheelchair, saying it's not covered, because, you're one of these guys from played in the 60s, you're broken down, you need a wheelchair. So you can get a prescription for the wheelchair from your doctor, then submit the invoice and the prescription and a letter from your doctor to the plan, and they will reimburse you. And and there's a whole list of stuff you can do. Mainly but it boils down to equipment, appointments, co-pays that aren't covered. All of that stuff can be reimbursed through this plan. So there's all sorts of benefits, incidentally, under the CBA that people don't know about. This is just another one. There's a lot of stuff. They actually have amazing benefits, believe it or not. NFL players do, retired players. So Clinton Portis is a guy who is getting the most attention here because he's by far the highest profile player. But there are a bunch of others. Robert McCune, former Redskin. John Eubanks, former Redskin. Tamarick Vanover, who was with Kansas City, San Diego. C.C. Brown, who was with the Texans, the safety. James Butler from the Giants and the Rams. Fred Bennett, who's with a bunch of teams. And then Etrick Pruitt. And then in a separate but related indictment, Carlos Rogers, who was a long-time Redskin and then moved to the 49ers, and then Correll Buckhalter were indicted for the same thing in a separate indictment, and I'll explain why. So here's what they were doing.
But isn't Joe Horn in there somewhere too?
Joe Horn is not in here.
Oh.
Now I'll get to this because there's a reason for it. I'll get to this. So, in as simple form here as I can make it, what these guys were doing was really, if you read, it doesn't completely state it openly and outright in the indictment, but if you read between the lines, Robert McCune is the dude behind this. Okay, and so what he's doing, he and Eubanks are the two guys that are kind of the ringleaders. Again, if you read between the lines. So what they're doing is they're sometimes in their own name, and sometimes they've recruited other retired former NFL players to do this. So they are generating a fake prescription, fraudulent letter from a fake doctor, fraudulent invoice for a medical equipment that was never purchased, and then they're sending it to Cigna and saying, "Hey, reimburse me." And so McCune and Eubanks are really the guys who were kind of running the show here. And so Cigna would repay the invoice. And so once then either Eubanks or McCune or the player whose name they submitted it in gets some money, then they split the money up, sometimes, in the form of kickbacks or bribes, or, again, if it was in their own name, they keep it themselves. Eventually, Cigna caught on to this and reported it to the Justice Department, the FBI. Now, the reason they caught on to this is because these folks were buying all sorts of crazy equipment. They were buying women's health equipment for the home, MRI machines. They were buying equipment that's used to treat horses, like $50,000 equipment used to treat horses. All sorts of crazy, insane stuff. And so Cigna eventually caught on, because insurance companies are smart, eventually. But before they caught on, the first group, which is McCune, Eubanks, Vanover, Portis, Brown, Butler, Bennett, and Pruitt, collectively submitted more than $2.5 million in invoices and were paid that much. Now, for Portis's involvement specifically, let me back up. There are 3 different counts that these people were charged with. 1, conspiracy to commit wire fraud and healthcare fraud. 2, wire fraud. 3, healthcare fraud. Okay? Now, Portis, for his own, was charged with 1 count of conspiracy, 1 count of wire fraud, 1 count of healthcare. McCune got charged with 9 counts of wire fraud, 9 counts of healthcare fraud. So that is this one, and we'll get to the details of it here. But for the other half of it, which is the Correll Buckhalter Carlos Rogers conspiracy, they were charged with 1 count of conspiracy, 2 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of healthcare fraud. They're basically doing the same thing. They were just doing it in different groups. Okay, that's the basics of it. Now, what interested me most, I think the biggest hole in this thing, is that there's very clearly people who involved in this who are not indicted, who probably will be indicted, and there's definitely a whole bunch of counts that were not listed because in the McCune-Portis indictment, they really only listed 9 separate incidents. Not really. They specifically listed 9 specific incidents of this, all equipment, and it added up to, if you do some math, $406,000, which leaves about 1.9 or so million. No, leaves $2.1 million unaccounted for. So there's a lot more that happened that is not in this indictment, and that either means there's more people involved, a lot more people, or there's more incidents to come and they just don't have the evidence for it. There may be other indictments. Now, you mentioned Joe Horn. There are people named in here who are not indicted. They're listed by their initials only, which probably means they can't prove intent yet. But I think there's almost certainly more to come on this because there's so much money unaccounted for. Because this indictment clearly states they were paid $2.5 million, and then they clearly only list $406,000. So there's more to come, and that's probably where Joe Horn comes in, because this is just the beginning of this. Okay, tell you what, the punishments for this, I'll go into more. I was trying to decide how much more detail I want to go into before I let you talk. So the punishments for this, the conspiracy to commit wire fraud and insurance and health insurance fraud is 20 years. Statute is a 20-year maximum sentence by statute. Wire fraud is 20, healthcare fraud 10. So those are the potential punishments. So Portis, if the government really wanted to put the screws to him, he could end up with 50 years by getting all 3 max sentences stacked, meaning consecutive. That almost assuredly won't happen. That's just a hypothetical max. The more likely option is if he is convicted, he will get concurrent sentences, meaning they're sitting on top of each other, so they won't be consecutive and he'll end up with a few years. That's more likely. That's the basics of it. Your thoughts before I get too in detail in this.
Well, one, right off the top, I mean, I think everyone knows that listens to the show that this is a Washington sports-based podcast, at least in its genesis, and it's, the network exists to cover the Washington Redskins. And I just have to say for a second how sad I am, because I love Clinton Portis. I loved him as a player. I love him as even a media figure, even though, he isn't necessarily the best broadcaster, but I find him actually insightful and funny. I enjoy him. He's been one of my favorite characters associated with the Dan Snyder Redskins era, which is a short list. So it really, really just bums me out. So I just want to name that right off the top of my statement. And he is by far, as you said, Joe Horn has not been indicted yet, but he is by far the only name of that group that even touches Clinton Portis in terms of career, notoriety, fame, etc. So he will be the big fish. He's the name that every media story led off with. He is the poster child for this scandal at this point. So that bums me out. Secondly, wow, this not only one, we know Clinton Portis, I'm sure these other players, especially since they did not have the careers he did, are in financial crisis. We know that is an issue in all sports with retired players. That Clinton Portis, I think, had filed bankruptcy, so that just about 2 years ago. So that had obviously been out there as a story. He's really been working hard in local media here in the Washington D.C. area, probably because those are paychecks. He's probably put those in jeopardy. But what I want to comment on is this is not your average crime, and what I mean by that is this is an insult to his union or their union. It's an insult to scamming the health benefits of the most violent, dangerous sport on the face of the earth. Maybe, you could debate car racing.
Boxing.
Boxing, sure. It's up there. And it's got more participants than any of those sports. So to defraud your union and then doubly to defraud the health benefit system of your union, that's a bad look. And it means that things like the union, like fellow players, no one's going to be rushing to these guys' defense, considering that he's basically been ripping off them. Now, he isn't directly necessarily, they aren't directly ripping off them, but this is not they're going to be vilified from all angles, let alone the fact that when the federal government brings an indictment, that they're pretty secure they're going to get a conviction.
I'll get to that. Okay, so here's why they actually are ripping off their fellow players. Federal law states that one of these health benefit plans must only pay out health benefit, medical related claims. If they pay off other claims not related to medical issues, they can lose their tax-free status. The benefits are tax-free when they're placed in the health account, and then the benefits are tax-free when they are paid out in the form of reimbursements. And so by doing this, by making this plan pay out stuff that's not medical related because it's fraudulent, they are endangering the tax-free status of the plan, thereby endangering the plan for everyone. Okay, so that's where the other players can legitimately get mad at him about, is that. Yeah, I mean, it's really sad for CP. I mean, and his background is more than just financial trouble. I mean, he got ripped off by some, according to him, he got ripped off by some shady advisor. And when he told a story to the local media where at one point he had grabbed a gun and he was going to go murder these people who ripped him off. He was like sitting out in front of some building stalking him, and one of his friends stopped him, from killing these people. So it's really a sad story, and I agree with you. I like him on the Redskins pregame show. He can't be possibly making a ton of money on that, but it's certainly enough to keep him, afloat, I would assume. So yeah, it's very sad. And Carlos Rogers is the other big name. He was a solid pro. Correll Buckhalter, another solid pro. But so I think the three of those from an NFL standpoint, but certainly Clinton, who is at least a borderline Hall of Fame consideration type player, is certainly the big name. So, but that is why it's endangers everybody, is because they're endangering the tax-free status of this thing. So, the conspiracy is really what gets them all. Okay, that's really what nails them all. Now, federal conspiracy laws were originally dreamed up, and along with RICO, the RICO laws, to really nail the mafia decades ago, okay? Because the mafia and the mob do a whole bunch of crimes, but it's a bunch of little things normally that they can get nailed with. And so if you have conspiracy, which basically says if two or more people have an agreement to commit a crime, then everybody's guilty of the crime, okay? So if you have a conspiracy charge, you can nail everybody with all of them. So that's why the conspiracy is a bad thing, because the indictment only actually lists Portis as doing one of these, submitting a reimbursement on March 8th, 2018 in the amount of an equipment, something called a Cryome Pro Cryosauna, and then something called a Sculpting Cryo lipolysis, whatever that is, $54,000. Yeah, and so basically he's alleging he bought a cryo chamber for his house. That's what it boils down to. But that's only $54,000, and so that's not even enough to really get the attention of the federal government. Because my experience with the FBI is that they really don't want to hear from you unless it's high profile enough or there's enough money involved, especially the money. So, but because this is a whole group of people to the tune of $2.5 million, it got their attention. So, that's really what gets Portis in the most trouble, and that's what's going to get him the most time, is if he gets convicted of the conspiracy charge. The other stuff is bad, but it's small potatoes. Just as for the sake of comparison, in terms of sentencing, the federal sentencing, let me back up. As Chris alluded to, the Justice Department has a very, very high conviction rate, in the 90 percentile range. Usually, if they charge they're very selective in the cases they take. Like I just said, they have basically an unlimited investigative budget. They can subpoena everybody all over the country. They have an entire investigative arm in the FBI to go do all this stuff. You can't beat them with resources. That's why their lawyers are very talented, career prosecutors. They're not politicians. The politicians are the U.S. attorneys for the for the regions, they're politicians, but they're frontline prosecutors are not political. They're just career prosecutors. They're very good, so they convict everybody. It's always better to plead it out if you get charged, but with the feds. So I was going somewhere else with this. Can't remember, but the point is here that the conspiracy charge, because they can wrap it all together. That is what is the worst thing, because then the court's going to say, listen, you aren't guilty of just buying one cryo chamber thing. You're guilty of perpetuating a $2.5 million conspiracy, which is going to get you a lot more time. Just for the sake of comparison, the recent student admission scandal that involved a bunch of Hollywood actors and actresses. Felicity Huffman, who was on, what show was she on? She knows this.
Real House. She was on
Desperate Housewives.
Desperate Housewives, amongst other things.
Yeah. Okay. So
actually, if you're a sports fan, she was on Sports Night way back in the day. Aaron Sorkin's first show, which was a thinly veiled sitcom parodying Sports Center. Okay,
there you go. She paid $15,000 to help get her daughter into college. I think it was USC. She ended up getting 14 days in jail, and that's it. A couple weeks, you're out. Lori Loughlin paid $500,000, was offered a 2-year plea deal, rejected it, and now is facing trial with sentencing that could go up to 20 years. Bernie Madoff, that's fraud. All those are fraud cases. The Bernie Madoff case, which is basically the biggest fraud case in U.S. history, defrauded 60 people out of $65 billion. He got 150 years. And that was when he pled guilty. So that's the range. And so if you kind of place them in the middle of that, you're looking at years, particularly for McEwen. But certainly all of them, they're looking at years in prison. Probably not 20, probably not 50, but many years. 6 or 7, I would guess, if they go to trial. Thoughts?
It's a bad situation is my basic thought. Now,
well, you know what, Chris? Here's the thing. I'm not a career prosecutor. I have prosecuted. Criminals aren't like these intellectual masterminds like you see in movies. It's like, I just watched half of Die Hard the other day. It was on TV on the Paramount channel, I think. And the bad guy in there, whose name is escaping me right now, was brilliant. He had this whole scheme. He had, hackers to get into a safe, and, he dreamed up this brilliant plot to make people think it was terrorism. It was really about money and all this stuff. Most criminals are really dumb. These guys are really dumb. These guys don't fall into the diehard category. These guys fall into the idiot category. There's no way that a sophisticated insurance company like Cigna was going to not see through this at some point, particularly when you're buying machines for horses. Males are submitting female health, equipment, reimbursements. There's no way this was not going to get caught, and yet they keep doing it anyway, over and over again, and they're buying the same exact equipment for different people. These guys are dumb, and it's not a surprise they get caught. The brilliance of what the FBI does, they have the resources to go out and get all the documents, and so whereas like a local prosecutor could never do this because you just don't have the resources to look up this, the FBI can go out and research this for years. The NCAA is about to find this out for basketball. And when trial comes, they will have all this lined out meticulously, and you just have no hope.
Yeah, no, I don't have a thing to disagree with there. First of all, let me say that the mastermind criminals exist. They just become bankers.
Well, that's another topic entirely for.
I just wanted to slide that in. These insurance companies, fighting fraud is top 3 priorities for them, just by the nature of their business. Yes, yeah. I mean, they're very hard to rip off, and so yeah, if you're just this dumb about it, it's going to click off. It's going to click flags. I mean, I hadn't even gone as deep into some of what the expense filings were. I mean, those are just insane that you would ever think that those, I mean, anybody, listen, most of us, all of us have worked in some capacity where we have health insurance through our employer or other employee benefits. We all know how much they go through that. We know how much paperwork is involved. We know how much oversight. We all have the experience of not getting what we think we deserve, even by the definition of the policies. So this idea that you're going to sneak these things through was just, you're going to get caught.
And you're going to go to your buddy and you're going to say, hey, we're going to try and rip off my insurance company. So help me submit some documents. And I'm going to tell them I bought a cryosauna. That I had a prescription for a in-home cryosauna. Will you do it with me? Okay. I mean, that's kind of what happened here. These guys aren't geniuses. They're football players, okay? We love them. Our whole entire network, as you said, is built around football. We love football. But make no mistake that most of these guys spend their life in athletic pursuits, not in intellectual pursuits. And so we're not talking about, not to say there's not some who are brilliant. There are. But generally speaking, these guys aren't masterminds of anything except football. And that really shows in this. The smart thing for these people to do, all of them, is to plead this out immediately, quickly. Because here's the other thing. Not only do I have in my legal career asked the FBI to investigate some bank fraud, and the FBI goes, no, this is just not a case. It's not high profile enough. There's not enough money. We don't care. Deal with your local government on this. The feds also don't have press conferences to announce indictments unless they're very sure. Okay, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District had a press conference about this this past week. Robert Duncan is his name. They don't do this unless it's a slam dunk. Okay, yes, it's possible that this is all a mistake, but it's highly unlikely. The feds do not want to embarrass themselves, and I'm telling you, I spent a couple hours reading these things last night, and what's missing out of here is all the rest of the money. So there's more to come. This is just what they can prove now. So this is not going to go away, and it's not going to get smaller. It has to get bigger. It explicitly says in the McCune-Portis indictment that they paid over $2.5 million. The Rogers-Buckhalter indictment says they paid over $1.4 million. There's $406,000 listed in the Portis indictment. There's $100,000 listed in the Rogers indictment. So there's a lot of money out there that the feds just have not indicted yet. Because each one of these is a new count. From a criminal perspective, each one of them is a new count. The reason why this is a federal thing, by the way, it's because of the wire fraud. When you fax a piece of paper, it goes over telecommunications lines instantaneously. It's a federal problem. Just as a bit of advice, if you're going to do this, try to defraud someone in your state, and don't do it over wires. Because if you do that, you can keep it out of the federal government, and you may have a chance. You can beat your local DA's office. You can't beat the federal government in these things. So that would be if anyone's out there is thinking about committing fraud, don't fax it. Don't use the telephone. Do it in person, and do it without crossing state lines. That would be my advice to the criminal element out there. But anyway, so that's my thoughts. Generally speaking, we could talk about this forever.
I have two follow-up questions. Yeah. So one, sure. Do you think they're well, one statement, then two follow-up questions. One, and also the federal government, especially, they love these high-profile cases, right? Like they. Oh yeah. Yeah. So let
me speak from a prosecutor's perspective. We liked nothing more than to nail somebody with some renown.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a resume builder, and the way prosecutors think is, what's the maximum amount of charge we can charge these people with? Okay. You shoot for the moon always, the more money involved, the higher profile people involved, the better off it is. They love this kind of thing for sure.
Totally.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so I think that's a great point. So now, do you think this scandal? How much bigger do you think this potentially is? And do you think they're trying to put the screws to these early players to go deeper?
Maybe. It's definitely bigger just because I keep saying there's money missing from these indictments, that is unexplained. I don't think that they would have indicted these folks to try to get at a mastermind. I don't think these people are smart enough. Okay, I don't think there's one player out there who's masterminding tens of millions of dollars. This is just a small group of people who thought they could get away. It's two different groups of a small number of people, 2 and 9, who thought they could get away with this. So I don't think that there's not I don't know, some like mafioso behind this, because I think they probably would have indicted him already, if they had him. So no, I don't think that. I do think it's going to get bigger because there's just too many things unexplained. And, they've named people in here in these indictments by initials and not indicted them, but they've called them participants, but they're not indicted. So that tells me either they just can't prove intent yet, because all these crimes have an element of intent, and that there's more to come. So if you've done this, you're not, if the Joe Horns of the world, if you did it, they're probably coming for you too. But I don't think that they're going to go out there and nail, who was who was the union guy that's buried under the Meadowlands?
Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, there's not a Jimmy Hoffa out there who's like masterminding all this stuff. No, I don't think so.
And then, what do you think the union's play is here to defend themselves? You talked about that this puts them in jeopardy to some degree. What's their move to sort of inoculate themselves?
Well, the union's role in this is that the plan is administered by something called a health board. And the health board is made up of 3 voting members of the union, 3 voting members of the NFL Management Council, meaning the owners, and then the commissioner. So really the union's only play is as a part of the health board. I would disassociate myself with this if I was the union entirely. I would say, look, there's nothing to defend. We don't have an obligation to defend you against criminal charges. We have an obligation to be your representative under the collective bargaining agreement for NFL matters. We do not have any obligation to you to defend you against the Justice Department. You didn't act with the authority or the color of authority of the union. You guys are completely and utterly on your own. If I were the NFLPA, I would either say nothing, or I would, or some bland statement, we're going to wait and see. Or if you really want to be aggressive, say what I just said, which is, to the extent these allegations are true and they're just allegations, understand that this has absolutely nothing to do with the union as a whole. The union did not sanction this, but the play really, they could do that, but the smart play would be to say nothing, because the other thing the union doesn't want, they don't want the FBI crawling around the union either. Just say this is not us at all, and I would be completely transparent if the Justice Department has come to them. They don't have any obligation to these idiots whatsoever, except again to manage the plan. Presumably the health board would need to set new standards for reimbursement, in the light of this, and to that extent, yeah, sure. I don't know if I answered your question. I think
no, definitely. All right, so I would imagine this is not the last time we will be touching on this story. So this is just at the beginning. This is the on your marks, get set, go stage of this story, for sure.
All right, for more indictments.
Yeah. So the next story that we wanted to cover, which was interesting, it's about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, just after our last show, stories started to pop about the NBA's ratings, which if you look across NBA TV, TNT, and ESPN, so those are all ways in which they broadcast games, how Nielsen factors ratings across those 3 averages out to a 15% dip in ratings. TNT is taking a bigger hit. ESPN is down, I think, 7 or 8 if you start to factor those out. I'm not exactly sure how they figure NBA TV. Lot of opinions swirling around there. The NBA has had a shine for the last couple years of being the sort of ascendant sport. for lots of reasons. It was kind of when the NFL was taking its, it turned out to be fairly short-term dip in ratings. The NBA was often sort of put out there as the sport that was kind of picking up that fan interest. The interest in the off-season is crazyville in terms of why people care to the degree they do. It's the hottest stove in professional sports. But this took a lot of people by surprise that these rating dips are pretty steep. Now, it's early in the season, and there are lots of reasons why, which we'll dig in here now. The prevailing conventional wisdom, that great conventional wisdom, is looking at a few factors. They're looking at early star injuries in the season. So you've got Kawhi Leonard, who was the champion and moved teams and is now in LA, not the Lakers, the Clippers. And Zion Williamson has, I think, not yet played a game or has been very injured.
He's been hurt. He's been hurt this entire season.
And then some other celebrity players. So, and it's the most celebrity-driven league, just because you only have, they have very little equipment, and there's only 5 of them on the floor at any one time. So they are celebrities just by nature, and there hasn't been those big names. Also, the NFL, especially on Thursday nights, has regained its mojo. And that they were competing in a sort of a trick of schedule and circumstance against Major League Baseball's postseason and World Series. So those are a number. And then the other one is the China mess, which we've talked about on previous episodes. So those are what most of the people are citing for reasons for their ratings downturn. All probably part of it, but none of them really jump out as the reason to me.
Yeah. To me, you could attribute the NBA rate or the NFL ratings dip to a lot of other reasons that we talked about on the show. The national anthem stuff. People were really mad at the players over that. I think the NBA is a lot less nefarious. Part of this is that a whole bunch of stars went west. LeBron James went west. Kawhi Leonard went west. Those games, because you can't start a home basketball game at 5:00 in the afternoon. They start at 7:00, and so they're starting very late on the East Coast. And just people just aren't going to stay up for those games. What the NBA would really want is the LeBron James game and the Kawhi Leonard game on at 7:00 on the East Coast. That just can't happen for home games, and so there's a lot fewer games that are on convenient times. You want to have the best game first and then the secondary game second in case people on the East Coast like Chris don't stay up for it. So I think that's a huge reason. The other reason is that the Golden State Warriors, the entire team's hurt. Steph Curry's out, Klay Thompson's out, Kevin Durant is gone and hurt. So the current dynasty, the team that's won 3 NBA titles? I think it's 3, right?
Yeah.
They are not the same team. They stink this year. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. And then you've got the best teams. One of them is in Milwaukee, which is just, sorry, it's just not a big TV draw. Even with Giannis, the Greek freak there, the draws and the best teams are the Lakers, who play at night. And then you have the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George team is also in LA. So I think that's a big part of it. It's just scheduling. It's scheduling, and the fact that the Warriors, who also play late, are not the Warriors anymore. I think that's the single biggest reason. And yeah, they did have games played against the World Series. That's the other thing. But the big picture is they're just not set up for big ratings. Ideally, I think the NBA would probably want those stars on the East Coast for ratings purposes.
Yeah,
that's just not the case anymore.
That's a great point. And one piece of data that would help back that up is that if you start now, obviously the Boston Celtics are a legendary franchise that has deep roots in its own market, but their ratings are actually up. So they're so games that are locally. So when they're played in their market at a 7:30, 8 o'clock start time, so if you start to look at some of these regions, that piece of data helps back up your West Coast, East Coast, what time is the game broadcast on? So, Washington, I mean, the Wizards are horrible, and they went not only head-to-head with the World Series in general, but a local team in the World Series. But their ratings are in just the toilet. So it's a really interesting, you start to break this down regionally, it definitely helps to to make the case on a bunch of these fronts. And you're right on the Golden State Warriors. Just not only having individual injuries, but the team of the decade being, their reign being over. It's going to take some time for some of that to readjust.
Yeah, I mean, all those bandwagon Warrior fans are not watching, anymore.
Oh, and by the way, just because I was curious, Milwaukee is the 36th media market in the country, sandwiched in between Cincinnati and West Palm Beach.
There you go. So the NBA is probably, the marketing guys at the NBA are pulling their hair out that the Greek Freak not only is in Milwaukee, but seems to like Milwaukee. They want Greek Freak types in New York.
Yeah.
And the Knicks are, the fact that the Knicks are bad, are historically bad, have been bad for generations, is marketing devastation for the NBA. It's the preeminent team in the preeminent market, and they're not just bad; they're Washington Redskins bad.
No,
James Dolan and we had this Twitter
Yeah.
conversation. Dolan and Snyder are brothers in arms, owner-wise, for how bad they are. James Dolan has insulted fans. He's thrown fans out of the arena. He's thrown players out of the arena. He's not produced a good team for a generation. I mean, the Knicks. It's like I always say, it's good for baseball if the Yankees and the Dodgers are good. It's good for basketball if the Lakers and the Knicks are good.
Well,
the Knicks are just not just bad; they're just awful.
No, and embarrassing and clueless, and even, you look at the Isaiah Thomas years, which they were still bad, but but then that
it was like sexually harassing employees, and
they're so bad. They're thinking about they need some kind of juice that they're thinking about bringing Jeff Van Gundy back. I like Jeff Van Gundy, but that's a grasping at straws of the last time they were even relevant. And by the way, they didn't win championships there either. That they were at least relevant.
Now, because believe me, if the Knicks were even competitive at all, they would be on every channel, every weekend, all the time. And they're just nobody wants to watch the Knicks. And don't forget, I mean, this, Chris, but they lost out a major recruiting battle after they swore up and down they were going to get Durant.
Yeah, free up all the free agent money.
And to get Durant and a bunch of other people, then not only did they not get any of those players, Durant went to Brooklyn.
Yeah, right. Even more insulting.
Yeah, right. And so the fact that the Knicks are so bad is another big part of it. The major team in New York just absolutely sucks rocks. And so you have a West-heavy star base. You have the NBA champion is not the NBA champion that they once were, and then the Knicks stink. That means ratings. I don't think there's fewer basketball fans. I just think it's set up to fail this year.
Yeah, I think that's true. But let's talk just quickly about, do we think this portends any long-term negative trends for the NBA? And so I'd say the rationale for that it might, first of all, I dismiss the China thing. I just think that's too esoteric of a political thing. It's not, no one's staying up late at night. No one's fighting with their neighbors. It just is not, it's just not, especially with so many political arguments and flashpoint, homegrown political things. That is not causing a blip in viewership.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I hated the way the NBA handled the China thing, and I disagreed with them politically, but it has nothing to do with anything ratings-wise.
But let's talk about a couple things. One, you could make a case that the NBA losing middle-aged, probably mostly white audience, basically the nature of the play, just the aging out. You hear a lot of that. From folks. Is that a long-term problem for them? And then two, is this some kind of aggregate effect of the hot stove where you just don't know who are teams anymore, right? And the kind of, I want to play with my buddies and the player-driven movements and those two kind of longer trends a piece of this or is that not relevant?
I think it's a smaller piece. I don't think it's a huge piece. Because these NBA players are far more outspoken than a lot of NFL players in terms of their political agendas and their social agendas and all that. But the NBA does a pretty good job of, aside from the China mess, the NBA normally does a pretty good job of keeping that away from the game itself. There are specific rules about it. They're not going to let people kneel for the national anthem, all that stuff. And so you can sit down and just watch a basketball game and be kind of divorced from all that stuff. And so I think the NBA has managed not to irritate my people quite as much as the NFL has. When I say my people, I'm a political conservative. And the NBA has managed not to irritate people to nearly to the degree the NFL has. So I don't think so. I just don't think it irritates people nearly as much. So from that respect, no, I don't think that's a part of it.
But even if you take like the sort of overt politics out, like just the style of the game, the kind of like emotional connection to the players, do they have an age problem?
Maybe so, because it's definitely geared younger, But I think if you're a basketball fan, you're a sports fan, I think most people just can sit down and watch a game and not worry about it too much. I do think they have a problem. I do think the players have too much power in terms of. I said that badly. I don't think it's good for the NBA to let the players move around nearly as much for the reasons you stated. Because it is really hard. Like, I'm a diehard Laker fan, and I'm going to root for whoever's in a Laker jersey. I don't much care for LeBron James as a person. I've never really been a big fan of his, but he's a Laker, and I'm going to root for him. But it's like I have to think about, okay, who's on my Lakers now? I really have to think about it. And so yeah, I think it's a bit tough, and I think the younger people, I'm talking about the kids. I don't like generational labels. I lose track of who's what, but whatever is the label for like the teenagers today. They don't follow laundry. They do not. They follow players. They almost don't care about teams, and that's magnified for the NBA, and that's a problem for them. I think the NBA would be better served by keeping these guys in certain franchises for longer and not giving the players so much power to move around and do whatever they want. That would be better for the game, and I think they've weakened the league and weakened the game by allowing the players to have that much power. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, this is an N of one. I know, but for myself, I don't know who the teams are anymore. So as a casual, I'm a Knicks fan, so I don't like basketball. And so if I'm going to decide to sit down on TNT or ESPN, and I don't know, I don't know who the teams are anymore. So it's hard for me to get excited about even something like Lakers, Celtics, or because I don't even understand the makeup.
Who are the
team,
Lakers and who are the Celtics?
I don't have a sense of that. It's not like like this is a while ago now, but you think about the Rondo, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Celtics. I at least knew
Ray Allen.
Yeah, I knew who they were right over multiple years, and I knew their trajectory. That's I think why your point about Golden State is actually really pertinent here, because they were the only kind of true team. They actually held it together. They kind of kept the same names and faces. I mean, obviously there's roster moves, but and so with them gone, I think if your connection to the league is like, oh, I like that team, and I tell you as a casual fan, not your hometown team, then not knowing who's what, where, when, and why does it for me is a blocker to sitting down and clicking on to the game.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think you're right. And like I clicked on a game, last week when I was doing some other stuff, and it was Milwaukee and somebody. I can't even remember who it was, and I had no idea who the players were on the other side. I mean, I knew the Greek Freak was out there, and that was it. I had no emotional connection to this game at all because, like you said, I don't know who is this team. I think the NBA is giving the players entirely too much power when it comes to that. The NBA, here's the thing: the NBA as a league is very player friendly. That's great for the players. It's bad for the game. I'm sorry. I mean, people out there are going to criticize me for it and blah, blah, blah. Well, face the truth. You can be player friendly, but just understand it's hurting the desire for people like Chris, who just said it, to want to watch the game. When you move around so much and you give the players so much power, it makes the casual fan, it makes it very difficult to watch. And so the NBA would be better served by not letting this happen. Even though it's probably too late now to pull the rug out.
Oh, I think the players are going to eventually wake up to it. But yeah, like I have a lot of emotional connections to Toronto. I was in and out of that city a ton for work. I have friends there. I kind of got excited for their championship run, and I'm always looking for an NBA team to adopt or care about because I'm a Knicks fan. But like Kawhi Leonard leaves, and I'm like, well, I'm like, nah, immediately.
Yeah, like name another player on the Toronto Raptors as a casual NBA fan.
Exactly. And to see him come back and defend, I probably would have been on the Toronto train a little bit, but now I could care less.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the NBA has to know this. I just don't think they really know what to do. And they don't want to get in a war with the union either. They don't. But they need to do something to. Here's the other thing about the NBA: it's a very top-heavy league. More so than the NFL, there's only a handful of teams that have any chance whatsoever of winning the NBA title. A lot of teams make the playoffs, but there's only 3 or 4 every year who have any chance whatsoever. This year it's the Lakers, the Bucks, maybe the Rockets, maybe the Clippers. I mean, the Clippers are never going to win anything because they're the Clippers. But I mean, point is, there's a handful, maybe 5 teams, and that's it. The rest of them, nobody has a chance. Zero.
The other 3 major sports do not have that problem. Baseball might be the closest, maybe, and that's still not even. That's even me just trying to make something up. The other 3 sports have a way more competitive balance.
And even with Major League Baseball and the free agency, players tend to stay.
Yeah.
They don't move around nearly as much, and so you can kind of have your team. Like I'm a Dodger fan. And the core group of people has been there a really long time. Clayton Kershaw, Justin Turner. And I've been watching, like I was like Corey Seager in the minors all these years. Julio Urias. I've known my Dodgers and my soon-to-be Dodgers for forever. In the NBA, it's like, man, even I'm such a big Laker fan. I have to study the roster every year to say, okay, who's here now? And it makes me care less. It really, truly does.
Just because I have it open in front of me, and we talk about these kind of things all the time, I mean, I'm going to quickly read out the top 10 media markets in the country. So 1 is New York, 2 is LA. These aren't going to be shocking. 3 is Chicago. 4 is Philadelphia, which I thought was a little higher than I would have thought. 5 is Dallas-Fort Worth. 6 is Washington, D.C. area. You'll have a lot of people tell you it's a small market. It is not. Houston, Texas, Bay Area, basically. San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, Boston, and Atlanta. Those are your top 10 media markets in the U.S.
As measured by what? Population?
No, I think it's. I'd have to go and look. We'll get that.
Okay.
I think it's percentage. We'll have to get that next time. Although,
all right,
I
wasn't trying to sandbag you. I mean,
no.
I was just wondering.
According to Nielsen.
Okay, so the most eyes are watching television or consuming media in those markets.
This is aggregate media metrics.
Okay. And so you relate that to the NBA. I keep coming back to the Knicks.
Yeah, the number 1.
And they're a Washington Redskins level disaster. It's a disaster for the NBA in ratings, and also, I mean, the Lakers have stunk for the past 5 years. The post Kobe Bryant Lakers have been awful. It's only been this year is the first time they've been good. So you really had a train wreck, post Kobe Bryant train wreck in LA, and a permanent train wreck in the Knicks in New York. That doesn't mean ratings gold.
Yeah. You only have one.
And for that matter,
go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean the Bulls also in Chicago haven't been great either. And so they've not had great teams in any of these major media markets, really.
No, I was going to say the only obviously Golden State, which is a Bay Area based team, is number 8. The only one. I mean, you look at, the Lakers have been up and down, the Bulls have been bad, Philadelphia hints at being good, but then kind of falls back. Houston is probably your second most consistent franchise in the top 10.
They haven't won anything either, though.
No, but they've at least been mediocre to watchable.
Yeah. I mean, which one did you mention there? I mean, the Philadelphia, they've only been they were at an epic level train wreck of
4 years ago, maybe
rebuilding for years. Where they were just openly just
tanking.
Jumping off a cliff. Yeah. Right.
They just kind of scratched their way to mediocre. We're not talking about any like
they may have a future because they have a lot of young players and all that, but they've been awful, and so there have been a lot of really awful teams in major markets, and there still are. I'm sorry to say this, and I feel like I'm always picking on Milwaukee, but the idea that the Milwaukee Bucks are one of the great teams right now. They're 24-3 as of this recording. That just makes the NBA cringe. It really does. They want the Milwaukee Bucks to be in like Miami, or one of those major media markets that you just read. They don't want a team that good in Milwaukee for obvious reasons.
Here's a couple NBA franchise media cities that are lower ranked than Milwaukee. You got Oklahoma City, New Orleans, and Memphis. Those are the next three that fall lower than Milwaukee.
Which, the Memphis Grizzlies have had their runs of being pretty good, and nobody cares because it's Memphis. So, point is, there's nothing we can sum this up. I think we've beaten this topic to death. To sum this up, unlike the NFL ratings, when I think we could have a legitimate conversation about the politics behind why the ratings dip happen, and certainly there's other reasons too, there's nothing nefarious going on in the NBA. It's just the nature of where the players are more than anything, and the nature of the teams that are bad and the teams that are good. That's why the ratings are bad in the NBA, in my opinion, in summary.
Yeah, and I think, especially considering that the NFL's ticked back up within 2 years, I think also obsessing about half-season or even full-season fluctuations is also kind of a sucker's bet. These are long-term gigs. Things are going to go up and down. You're going to have peaks and valleys.
I've always said sports leagues and players and owners need to understand that what they're providing is escapist entertainment. And it is not in their best interest to let their leagues and let their layers promote causes. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Nobody wants to hear it. Your average fan doesn't want to hear it, should I say. And what we really want is to see players to shut up and play. That's what's best for ratings. And that's just the truth. And I'm sorry, because people are going to criticize me for that, and that's fine, but that's the truth. Shut up and play is best for everybody. It is. Am I wrong? I'm not saying you don't have you could argue about the rights of the people and, when they can say what, and we can have that conversation. We have on this show, but the simple fact of the matter is what's best for the league is not any of it.
No, I don't disagree.
Shut up and play.
I don't disagree with that. I don't endorse shut up and play, but I can't disagree with the fact that it's escapist entertainment and they do best when they just shield themselves from those things. Now, the reality is that they can't always, and they won't always, and we also live in more charged times than we may have even 20 years ago. So the ebb and flow of that too will affect it. But yes, I think you can't argue the fact that if the more middle of the road, milquetoast, no opinion central is probably for something that people are doing to escape is a good policy.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. What more can be said?
All right. Well, these are two good meaty topics that, as Steve said, we have ridden the horse hard on. Both, I imagine, will pop up going again here coming up. And we probably will be talking about the NBA's second half season ratings rebound is my prediction. But we're brought to the close of this show. Steve, why don't you give a bunch of hog-style plugs, including your hat trick of podcasts today?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, and just, what we'll be talking about in a few months is the effect of the 2020 NBA champion Lakers on the NBA. I have no doubt. Go Lakers. In terms of the hog-style, okay, so we are wrapping up the season for the hog-style podcast, so we've got a couple more weeks of pre and post game show stuff before we head into our off season calendar because the Redskins stink and are never in the playoffs. We've got the Seasons of Discontent, which is Rick Snyder's look at everything Washington D.C. sports and life. Yours truly will be making an appearance on the current episode that is out now. When you're listening to this, I will be on that show, so please don't turn it off just because I am appearing on it, and we've got a ton of good written content as always.
All right, and we will be back in 2 weeks, and we look forward. Well, yes, we will be back in 2 weeks, and happy holidays. This will probably fall right in the middle of a bunch of those. So if we don't say it then, we'll say it now, and we'll see you then.